Artifact 11, covering Standard 6.2, Criterion 20, Managing the Use of Technology for Learning in a Non-Traditional Classroom Setting. Managing the use of technology in student learning strategies and digital platforms, virtual environments, hands-on makerspaces, or in the field. Okay, so these artifacts that I have here for you to see are over a lesson that I conducted in my ELA classroom for Langston Hughes' A Dream Deferred poem. I decided that this would be a neat variation assignment where students were tasked to use Scratch, a coding platform for storytelling, to create a unique variation to themselves over their own dream deferred. So here you see some images where students are demonstrating on-task composing of this Scratch poem while troubleshooting and asking questions. You see in the middle where students are collaborating together and offering peer feedback as they problem solve during the design process. And then on the right, you will see where a student shares a Scratch poem and uses Rubric as a checklist. Okay, here you will see my original Scratch poem rubric for the assessment. Students had to create an original poem, make sure that they incorporated at least 2 sprites interacting with one another, that there was movement within the story, that there was at least 2 incorporated background images, that the story was between 20 and 180 seconds long. They were able to provide their URL and peer comment and reflect over the process as a whole. My artifact shows here how I kept students, learners engaged and on task when they were learning in a non-traditional way, and I outlined the rules, guidelines, and parameters regarding the use of technology that I use with my learners in a non-traditional learning environment. Students had a checklist, a rubric, they knew the expectations if they were to not utilize the technology appropriately, and they did rather well. Okay, here's Artifact 11, Standard 6.3, Criterion 21. Creating opportunities for students to use a design process and/or computational thinking. Students were also given learning opportunities to challenge themselves to use a design process and computational thinking to innovate and solve problems. Again, in this particular artifact, I've provided evidence of the design and implementation of a recognized design thinking or computational thinking process in my instruction of the Scratch poetry. My artifact outlines each of the steps of either the design thinking process or the computational thinking process, and each step explains the learning activities and process for learners to complete. Here is an example of the creative learning spiral, where students were tasked to imagine, create, play, share, and reflect on the process of their computing project, which was their dream deferred poem. They had to brainstorm their original poem, create their variation using Scratch, play around with the platform and coding, share their poems with an authentic audience, and peer review and reflect on the process as a whole. I did offer students a reflective task where they had to reflect on Schoology, our learning management system, over the Scratch digital poem. Here's some examples of what students had to say. Here's an example as well of computational thinking and how that was provided for this assignment through abstraction, where students had to create their own variation of the poem. Students had to examine word choice, figurative language, and thematic messages. Decomposition, for those students needing to outline the details, they were developed or tasked to develop a thematic topic and build a concept map to identify the main areas of need, characterization, setting, dialogue, imagery, etc. Pattern recognition, when they began looking at their coding for details of repetition. The task required them to create the same kinds of emotions and have the same sensory appeal as the original, but incorporating new ideas as well. And then noticing the algorithm section for this computational thinking step, students relied on their intuition and practice with Scratch to create problem-solving algorithms to ensure success on their product. They were able to troubleshoot and work through the process collaboratively. Lastly, we have Artifact 11, Standard 6.4, Criterion 22, Model and Nurturing Creativity, Model and Nurturing Creativity and Creative Expression to communicate ideas, knowledge, or connections. My criteria here will show my own creativity and designing opportunities for my learners to be creative with digital tools and technology, My artifact provides evidence of nurturing this creativity for my learners with either the opportunity of peer feedback or opportunities to showcase the final product to an authentic audience. Here I have a link via a Microsoft spreadsheet where students had to provide documentation of their shared collaborative Scratch poem. They had to embed their Scratch URLs and view others' work to leave peer review feedback. So as this student, you will see in the middle in blue, provided their link, and then there were students that commented, could be anonymously, to this particular student on some segments that they liked. And of course, we have some silliness, but it's high school. In order to model and nurture creativity, I demonstrated my own Scratch poem for students to view, The Fairy and the Fox. I shared this model and explained some of my own misconceptions and tricks that I learned during the design process. Coding was new to me as well, so this was an authentic example of how I worked through the computational thinking process as well. I also worked to incorporate feedback in my classroom while walking around constantly to offer immediate live time help.